This is Grant from Adelaide Moulding Casting Supply, and he's going to do a tutorial today on just casting pieces for us.
What I'm doing for you guys today and girls in a bit more condensed is what we call our beginners moulding and casting course. You must do this one then to go on to do the advanced course. This one at our little retail store, I think it's about $55, $60 a person for a couple of hours. The advanced one with all your materials, 6 hours, is I think about $270. So what I'm going to do today is take you through how to make a two-piece mould, because just on what Henry gave me, this little box of tricks of all your parts that you use, it was a mould maker's nightmare looking in that box. So
yes.
So I've actually picked a very straightforward one to show you today, and because it is a little bit involved making a two-piece mould, I actually got a head start on Friday, but I'll show you how I got to that stage first of all, so we can move on, because we've got to wait in this case for 2 lots of silicon to cure and then also the resin to cure before I can show you the final part. So I've actually already done the first silicon, so we'll see the second silicon pour on the resin today. I've kept the 2 sides to Henry's sword, which this all goes well should click into this part, and just show you how easy it all works. So mould making, in the case of what you're using and what's applicable to you, today we're going to show you using a pinky silk silicon, which is a fast set addition cured silicon. When you're making a mould, you need to come up with your master, and in the case of your parts there, that would be what we call your master. Now you can take a mould straight off that. You can cut and shut it, as they call in the in the car model industry, where they'll get a part but they want it to look different, so they'll actually add to it, cut something in half, add another bit onto it, use a product called Epoxy Sculpt, which if you look right at the bottom of the first page, that's a 2-part epoxy. You need A and B together. It sticks to anything. It'll you got about 3 hours sculpting time, and you can sand it, file it, shape it, and turn your original into a totally different part. Or, if you don't want to destroy your original part, take a mould off, reproduce your original, then cut and shut the duplicate. So you've still got your original to go back into your kit. Alright? So, lots of different opportunities, but that is called your master. Once you've got your master, you're then going to make a mould box. A mould box can be anything, and in this case I've used clay. In the case for the little railway modelers, it's just a piece of plastic lid off a box that I've used to stick down my part. Silicon's expensive, so I've just got some of the clay to block out the corner so we're not wasting silicon, and then we end up with a little mould like that. Now, that's what's called a one-piece open-face mould. Alright, the back of this piece of railway bridge is dead flat, so we don't need to make a 2-piece mould. So that's why I can stick it down into my mould box, pour my silicon into that, and then once it's cured, I pull it out, and that's where the name one-piece open-face mould comes from. Alright, so when we pour our resin in, it's just a flat back on it, and that's our finished product when it comes out of the mould. Okay. In the case of most of what you people are doing, it's a 2-piece, maybe even a 3-piece mould. So it's starting to get a little more, not difficult, but you've got to put some thought into your moulds and how the mould, the 2 pieces or 3 pieces are going to come apart, how they lock together. Show you that one once we do it. So yeah, it's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle, and working out how that jigsaw puzzle is going to pull apart. So in the case of, imagine we're going to make a mould of these, one of these parts. So what you do is, and what I've done under there, you'll see it after, is I've actually got a clay base, which I have, if you warm this modelling clay up, it's the very top one on your sheet there, it's an oil-based clay. The more heat goes into it, the softer it gets, the easier it is to work. You put it out in the sun, put it in your pocket, in a plastic bag, not out of the bag. In your pocket. So, yeah, just with your oil on your skin, that'll very easily smooth off. You can also sculpt parts. So if you wanted to make a very unique, individual, original part, you could actually sculpt it with the modelling clay, the monster clay, the super sculpey, or the epoxy sculpt, and you could actually make your master and then take a mould off that. So you could have something that no one else has got and start making some money. So, okay. So with my master now, I've got my clay base. I'm then going to set that down in. Now, in the case of these parts, it's very simple. There's no real undercuts, tiny bit where the hole is down the middle there, but so all I'm going to do is just work that down into the clay. I want to make sure that it's all the clay sealed up against the part. I don't want gaps between the clay and the part, or else the silicone will run in underneath. So then when you pull it off, turn your part over. If you've got a gap under there, when you turn it over, the silicone will have run in underneath, and we don't want that happening, because on our second pour we want to pick up all this intricate detail, all those little holes. So in the case of this little sculpting tool, there's lots of different types, and all you would do then is you would just work the clay up. If there is a little gap, you can just get some little bits of clay off with your tool, just work it into those little gaps there, just carefully seal it off, so that, and a bit like the fine detail you're doing is the same fine detail you put into your mould making. The effort that you put in now when you're making your mould will determine the finished result, whether it comes out 100% looking like that or whether it's got daggy bits hanging off it, etc. Now, silicone is a very accurate product as far as picking up detail. And what I'd like you to do is just pass those around. That one can go that way. That's been laser etched by the uni students in architecture. Have a look how fine the laser etching is, and then look at the silicone mould, how it's picked it up. And you guys can go that way. Have a look at the detail in the mortar joints of that brickwork, and the silicone mould has picked up every tiny part of that. So the effort you put into,
and that's the resin reproduction,
sanding, filing, polishing, finishing your final product before you take the silicone mould off it, because your end product will have whatever you've given that, whatever you've left on your master will be picked up in that silicone. So if you've got little scratches, dents, chips, every casting you do out of that silicone will have that same scratch, dent, chip. Now, in what you're doing, you don't want that, so put the effort into the master right up. And even if it takes an hour to sand it, file it, smooth it, put that effort in at the start, all right? So I've set that down in there. I've carefully sealed all the way around with my clay. When we're making a two-piece mould needs to come together and join. It needs to accurately join together. If it's just a smooth surface like that, two smooth surfaces against each other are not going to relocate, so you need to key them. How do you key them? You key them by putting, you could use the dome off a little dome nut. You can use anything as long as it's not giving you what's called an undercut. An undercut is an in and under. Okay, so it needs to be able to pull parallel, clean.
Yeah.
So any sort of mark like this, as long as you're not digging a hole in under like that, because the silicone needs to pull apart. The two halves need to pull apart. You can even go to sort of this sort of detail if you want to. Make a V all the way around, but it's a bit fiddly, so it's a lot easier. In the case of this, what I did was I had a super big biro with a big V on it, and I just used that all the way around, made myself a nice little conical shape all the way around. Once we've fitted that down, we've done our little relocation grooves all the way around. Then what I've done next is I've made up, in this case, because it's a custom shape, it's a sword blade in under here, I've actually custom made with my modelling wax a mould box to go around that. So the advantage of that is I can shape it to the shape of my master, and I'm not wasting silicone again. Yeah. So just imagine in there is this sword blade with this around it, and then I've mixed up my silicone, which will show you the second stage. I've poured my silicon in, and that's the first half of our mould, our silicon mould. Right? So what I'm going to do so I keep the process happening is now I'm going to take the mould box off here, and it's as simple as cutting down through the clay.
And just out of curiosity as well, with the clay you've used to make that moulding box, can you reuse that again?
This is why I don't make any money, you see, because you can keep reusing a lot of my stuff.
With the oil-based clays, they don't set.
Correct, correct. So as long as you pick out or scrape off the bits of silicon that are left over on there, which will come off pretty easy, or if you're making a plaster jacket mould, as long as you keep your clay clean, and as soon as you finish with it, put it back in the bag and seal it up so the dust and muck doesn't get in. Keep it in a cool place. Yeah.
So would sticking in a fridge do any harm to it? Or?
I wouldn't worry about that. I just put it in the cupboard and just keep it out of the sunlight. So, all right. So, very simply, what I just explained, there it is with the first layer of silicon on. Okay. So, now what I'm going to do is I now need to reproduce the other side of our sword blade. I ideally don't want to separate, although I don't know how, if it will or not, I ideally don't want to separate the silicon, the sword blade from the silicon, but we'll see how we go. So what we're going to do now is make sure, and this is where you don't want that lifting, that master lifting out of your mould box. The other thing too is because silicon is so accurate at picking up detail, it will also, this is a bit oily, you touch that, and actually there's fingerprints on it already, silicon will actually pick up that, and when you cast your finished product, it will have all that little sort of dull flatness where your fingers been touching the...
So rubber gloves?
No, just wipe the part.
Just don't touch it.
One or two things, don't touch it, or as I'm about to do now, just finding this bit of silicon good smooth under there. All I've done is made my mould box again around my silicon mould. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Grant.
Okay. So now, because the silicon's flexible, there's a slight bit of movement between the clay and the silicon, so I've done the best I can there. We're now, without any further ado, going to use our pinky seal. Now, I talked earlier silicon. There's two types of silicon. There's a addition cured silicon, which this one has slightly less shrinkage than the other type, which is called a condensate cured silicon. So the industrial designers would use this. This is good for epoxies, polyurethanes. In the case of pinky seal, it's fast set, so it's got a 6-minute pot life at about 23 degrees. It's a bit warmer than that in here, so it'll set a bit quicker. The warmer it is, the quicker it'll set.
How long a shelf life does that normally have?
Silicons have 12 months officially.
Yep.
Okay, yes, you will get a bit longer, but we only give you 12 months because different people store things differently. Yeah. So we've got to cover all bases. Okay.
Yeah.
So with the silicon, there's two parts to it. It's not a hazardous, dangerous product, and when it's cured, it's actually a skin-safe product. You can make jewellery, whatever, with it, and you say skin-safe. So, silicon, part A is the white, the part B, the catalyst, is pink. The colour doesn't mean anything. This supplier, Barnes, decided to call it pinky seal and make it pink. A couple of ways you can do it. You can either, if you've already made some moulds before, weigh a similar sized piece of silicon. That'll give you a bit of an idea. If not, you can do a bit of a volume thing, and you can get your cup that you're going to use, and it doesn't have to be that big. It can be a 60ml cup, and go, I reckon it's going to be about that, so 20 times 3, 60 mils, okay? Or you could use rice. Tip rice in there, tip it back into the cup, it'll give you a volume, and that gives you a bit of an idea. Pinky seal is one of the few that it's equal parts by weight or by volume. Others, it's not like that. The weight will be different to the volume because of the specific gravities are different in A and B. It is equal parts of A and B. Some are 5% catalyst, some are 10% catalyst. There's lots of different silicons out there. I know for a fact that was 80 mils I used the other day. I don't need it quite that thick on the top, so I'm going to go equal parts A and B. I want 60 mils, so I'm going to go 30 mils of A and 30 mils of B. It is actually easier if you've got scales, because that gives you a digital readout to the gram, obviously. Holding this cup, I hope that I've got it level and getting it finished spot on the little line there. Now, as I said, silicon is sticky, messy stuff. Don't just pour it and screw the lid on. So I promise you all that silicon there, the next time you come back, will all be down the face of the bottle. You grab the bottle and you've got sticky mess everywhere. So wipe it off now. Another good habit to get into is to mark on the lid A and B. Now with the silicon, it's not so bad. It's got part A, part B. It's not so bad. But when you've got your resins, I promise you, if you mix the lids up, you won't get the lid off the next time. All right? Always put the lid on straight away, because I don't know about you, but I've got a bit of Italian in me and I managed to do that and knock the bottles over, okay? Mixing stick, we've got tongue depressors, we've got little ice cream sticks. All these products I'm using today don't go, oh, hang on, where the hell do I buy that? We've got the whole lot there, okay? As soon as this goes in there, our hot life starts. Comes the Italian bit, I'll put the lid back on. Very simply, the manufacturer spends hundreds of thousands of dollars millions developing these products. They give you all the info here. You don't redesign the wheel, reinvent the wheel, okay? Stick to what the manufacturer says. Equal parts by volume or by weight. Pot life, 6 minutes at, tells us here, 23 degrees. Warmer, we know we've got less than 6 minutes. Colder, we will get longer, okay? Tells us the colour, tells us that pot life 6 minutes. Pot life is mix A and B. The moment it goes in, the pot life starts. You've got 6 minutes to get it mixed and get it into your mould box at 23 degrees. Once you go past that time, it starts to gel and you're pouring just like jelly that you eat out, and you're going to end up with a crappy mould, okay? Demould time, 20 minutes plus. Now that 20 minutes plus depends on the temperature. I always say minimum of half an hour, okay? So here we go, it started. In we go, up to 60 mil, right about there. Wipe that top off, lid back on. Now, here's a trade secret I all want you to remember. We tip the white silicon in first. What do you see on the bottom of the cup? White in the corners. There's no way in the world the mixing stick is going to mix all the pink in properly. Catalysing it's called. So customers do this after one mix, tip it into their mould box, and then come back to me a week later and say it's still sticky on the top. Why? The reason it's still sticky on the top is because you haven't mixed it properly. Alright? So I very quickly mix that. I get another cup, I tip this into there, I scrape all the sides and the bottom of the cup into here. So what I guarantee is that is still going to be sticky in 24 hours time, and it's a lot warmer than 20. Now another trick is when you're pouring, there's lots of bubbles in there. We pour slowly from a height and we pour into the one spot into our mould box. We don't zigzag all over the place. Nice and high. Be careful if the wind's blowing, because the silicon will end up out there. And this is starting to thicken already, okay? So I'm guessing it's closer to high 20s in here. Now, that's it. I'm not going to fiddle with that anymore. Put it over there out of the way. Now you're welcome to have a look. There's lots of tiny little bubbles in there, but what I guarantee is there won't be any down against the surface that we want to reproduce. How do we clean the cups? What we do, and we'll show you at the end, we wait for it to, that one will cure properly, this one will sort of cure. That will just peel out like with this glob off. That one will sort of peel out, and then you can just get some tissues, a little bit of acetone or whatever, and just give a bit of a wipe out. Okay. So once again, you can reuse your clay, you can reuse your cups, and in actual fact the stick as well. Give that a good wipe off right about now. Get to reuse your stick as well. So I'm not doing too well so far, am I? Some people are a little bit anal on their moulds and want that to be perfect. So if you wanted to, you could use a bit of this rocket release, do a very light spray from a height. That'll break the surface tension when you very first poured it, and you'll see lots of bubbles come up. It's just a visual thing. The other thing I actually neglected to say was, bad of me, before I poured that silicone in a perfect world, you would put a very light spray over the top of your master. It helps more, not so much with plastic parts, but more with other sorts of masters you're making a mould off, just for the silicone to release off nicely. But we will be using this each time we want to pour our resin into here. Okay. So what you've seen there is how simple it is to make a two-piece mould. The only tricky bit is, as I say, if you've got lots of in and under undercuts, you've really got to look at it and work out how the silicone is going to pull apart the silicone pieces off that without breaking, you know, you've got a long thin part going up, you know, where it's going to split to come apart. You don't want to bury the whole thing and snap it off, you know. So what you do is, and once again there's lots of YouTube stuff, but you would get a pencil and you would actually draw it down, and then you can visualise where all the different sections are going to come apart, how you're going to band it up after, how it's going to have a flat top on it or a bottom on it so that you can sit it down to cast it after. Alright, so we'll let that cure. The next thing to consider is the resins that we're going to cast in. Now we talked about epoxies, but one of the more common ones is polyurethanes. Polyurethanes come in rigid, in a rigid finished product, either a white or a tan, a clear, and they also come in flexible. So as an example, the parts you're making, you use a product similar to your Easy Cast. Flexible polyurethane can actually be used for making a mould as well. So we have customers that make your railway sleepers and your pavers, they use polyurethane. With regards to polyurethanes, it's a brilliant product as far as easy to cast. You can get different urethanes with different set times depending on what you're doing. And the other brilliant part of polyurethanes, and epoxies for that matter, is you can add fillers to them. You can add pigments and colours. So we've already discussed previously, if you're using a clear, how you can put a translucent, you know, to get that see-through look. You can also add, in the case of this one, I added what's called a Pearlex powder. And quite simply, a Pearlex powder is a bit like looking at the bonnet of a car when it reflects in the sun. Not quite as big a grains, obviously, and you can get so many different looks. This one here is what they call silver dust, but it's actually hammered aluminium down to really fine dust, and you can get that metallic aluminium look. Stainless steel, once you hit that, that's a stainless steel in the Easy Cast, and once you hit that with the steel wool, you bring up the high points of shine, and it gets that metallic stainless steel look about it, and it'll be heavy too. It won't feel like plastic. The Easy Cast is white, so what you could also do is, because you may risk a little patch of white showing through, you could put a little bit of grey pigment in there as well, so just in case the stainless steel powder doesn't saturate the resin, you've got a grey background there anyway. The Pearlexes added to a clear, that's the sort of effect that you'll get. A little bit left of field, probably what you people are doing. We're looking at bringing in all the glow-in-the-dark powders as well soon. And this is just more from an artist's point of view, but this is our Easy Cast. that we just drizzled some of the translucent PSTF pigment, a bit of avocado green and a bit of pink. And once again, it's a little bit left field of what you're doing, but that just shows different effects you can get with different pigments. Polyurethanes have a 3-month shelf life. I've told you all the good parts of polyurethane. The bad part about polyurethane, apart from the shelf life, is moisture in the air gets into the resin, and the one that I've been using up until now just went in the bin because it's been sitting around a while. What happens, particularly in part A, and you'll see it, this build-up of orange in the bottom, and it's the moisture in the air, gets into the resin, reacts with it, and then it basically kills off the resin. Okay? So keep that in mind. You only want to buy what you're going to use in 3 months. With this one, I could have used a harder silicone, and then it wouldn't flex nearly as much, or I can make 2 thin silicone moulds and then put what's called a mother mould or a jacket mould around it. That mother mould or jacket mould can be very cheap. It's plaster. This is actually not plaster of Paris, which is very soft. This is what we call Hydrocal 105, compressive strength of 6,000 psi. Your plaster of Paris is about 2,000, maybe a bit less. So that's why this is so hard. As you know, the other good thing about this is when we pour our resin in, we need to either put a weight on the top or band it up. Now when it's soft and flexible, we band it up. As we said, it's going to compress. The great thing about this is that I have made with relocation points in the plaster. Okay, we put this together, and what do we got? We've got one solid unit that we band up once we've poured our resin in, and nothing's going to distort it. Yeah, the advantage of being able to lock everything solid without it distorting is obviously in the case of this sword blade, we want it straight. We don't want it with a woof off to one side or whatever. So, so because it's oil based and the silicone is silicone, which doesn't want to stick to most things, just clean off that bit of silicone. It's nice and clean. All the little bits, and it's all ready to go back in the bags. As I say, we're accelerating things that's lost its stickiness now. So I will just very gingerly that is our 2-piece silicone mould. What I will say is we're all impatient beasts. We all want to get to this stage and start casting. It's actually curing for a week, that stuff. Left it since Friday. Even though they say 20 minutes, and yes, we'll get a result out of it. Let it cure properly, and that's how you get longevity. Yep. Use your mould release. With your mould release, there we go again. It's a very light spray. Don't drown the mould before you're going to cast your resin in, because it will fill up all the fine detail and you'll lose all what you want in that casting. The other thing too is after every perhaps 2, maybe 3 casts, hot soapy water, scrub the mould gently with a soft toothbrush, dry it out thoroughly, and then start again. Okay, you can get away with, I said every time, maybe every second or third. But if you keep just spraying the release agent into your mould, it's going to build up, and you just lose that definition. The other thing too, this one is ozone friendly. It's paintable. When your part's set, pull it out of the mould, hot soapy water, scrub it, and then you can paint it. Or, as we said earlier, you can use solid opaque, which I don't have any here, but you can use a solid opaque pigment and you can make your resin grey, you can make it any colour you want. The good thing about putting the opaque resins into the resin is the colour is right through it. So if you scratch it or whatever, the colour's always there and you can give it a polish back out. Painted, you can't polish it without going back through the surface. So this is called a squash mould. If you had a bigger part, a lot more resin in it, what you could have done was used a toothpick and sat that into the clay, and then just like we pulled the master out, we pulled the toothpick out, and there's your natural little air vent. With this, I'm not just going to go plonk. I'm going to try and sort of from one end close it so it's facing the area. The other thing I didn't touch on right at the start, you want a dead level work area. Because if the bench is not level, the silicon is going to level itself. So when you turn the mould over, if the top, that's going to be level, but that won't be level. So that's why it's important. And also now, when I pour the resin in, the last thing I want is the whole lot flying off over the end. Alright, so I'm organised. I've done my spray, everything's ready to mix. I've got my tissue to wipe the top. Okay, so that 2 minutes has started. Now, how do we get it in there? One or two ways. We don't double mix this because we don't have time. We can either pour it. Another way is to run it down your stick. Although I'm going to be careful because there's almost enough there already. You can run it down your stick like this as well. And like the silicon, you don't zigzag all over the place, you just let gravity. It's an exotherm reaction, chemical reaction, and I can feel that's getting really hot already. I'm going to put the tiniest bit on this half as well.
You would get another bit that was a bit finer to buff out the structures. So
It's actually starting.
take that with you. And that
Now, we'll pour the
So you can fiddle with it a tiny bit, but don't go crazy.
just normally when you're just pouring it straight into a mould, you wouldn't fiddle like this, but it's starting to thicken already. You can feel the heat. The only downside of a squash mould is there's always going to be a bit of mess. I think we'll go that way. Okay, so here we go. Straight over, and we'll push that end down towards there, like so. Put them in there. And let's wait till I get it out. It might be a disaster. Wipe your stick. You can reuse your mixing stick. Leave that to cure properly. That'll just pop out of the cup. The other thing I didn't get a chance to say is I have actually an even finer piece of wire than this around the end over, and then all that little fine detail like there. If you're worried that you've got a bubble in your silicon mould because the end's rounded over, it won't scratch your mould. You can just, and this one I know for a fact I get little bubbles along that edge there. I just run that along that edge and pop the bubbles when I first poured the resin in.
Yep.
That just lifts the bubbles. Now just quickly, the thicker the part, the more exotherm heat is generated, which is the chemical reaction. This goes up to 100 degrees when it's curing. Okay, so you obviously never ever put that on your skin. The same with gypsum. You never ever put that on your skin because that gets really, really hot as well when it's curing. The silicon doesn't. It's skin safe silicon, as I said earlier, for mould making. Now, I've done, and it's strange, when I looked at this mould, I thought that little piece of wire, I should have just touched that corner. Pass it around, sure enough, there's one tiny, tiny little bubble in that the corner there, but the rest is all come out. So, trying to touch the part because the fingerprints and stuff, but have a look at the detail in that side of the sword blade that it's picked up there. It's another one we didn't, for obvious reasons, touch on here, is you can, with silicon, do like low temperature metal castings. So we have a silicon which will take up to 400 degrees Celsius. A pewter goes up to 360, 330 degrees. So the same technique we've done here, melt it on your stove at home, pour it into the silicon, and there's your metal part. Thanks for your interest. That was a quick overview on how to do it. My staff are always happy to help you down there with any info. For those of you that are not aware, all the products are online. It is cheaper to shop online. We ship all over Australia. Or we do have the ability for you to shop online and pick it up after 24 hours. Don't do it the night before you're coming down because you won't get it. the longer you give us, the better, and it'll all be waiting. You walk into the shop, you look in the box, say, yep, sign off, and you walk off.
Oh, awesome.
Simple as that. So, thanks for your time, guys.
Yeah.